Perfect. Thank you so much. So this is our fourth knowledge build session, and today we're going to tackle one of the most uncomfortable topics, ESG tensions. In the last sessions, we covered some key topics around ESG. We started with discussing what ESG means, what makes an investment impactful, and ESG in practice. And today the focus is to go deeper into the trade-offs, the moral contradictions, and the moral questions that a framework such as ESG cannot solve. It cannot provide direct or clean answers, no? So that is to say that this is a session that will not be providing clear answers or clear takeaways, but this is intentional, no? The goal of this session is to have discussions around this topic, and to make us a little bit uncomfortable around some topic, no? So I would like to encourage you to participate, open your mic whenever you want and share your thoughts. Great. Thank you, Lorenzo, for sharing on your screen. I can see it well. And maybe we can go on to the agenda. Perfect. So very quickly, we will start with framing ESG tensions. Then we will discuss what are the main issues or problems with ESG today. Then we will jump into some real world tensions with some examples for discussion. And then we will try to wrap up with some practical ideas or lens from the investor perspective by closing with discussions and questions as always. Maybe we can go to the next slide. Thank you. So this is just to say where we stand into our overall training calendar, and that the upcoming session will be happening in July. Perfect. So let's start with the quote that we have on this slide. No, every investment already embeds a moral position. ESG just makes it visible within a framework. No, so here we wanted to bring some examples of some key tension zones. For example, defense, fossil fuels, AI, and labor models. These are examples, but they're not just random cases. They are hot topics in VC investments today, and that's why we chose them. No, so for example, and we will have a moment to discuss in more detail in the next slide. No, but let's take a defense tech company. No, so I can start framing a bit the moral questions and the topics between ESG and ethics, so to say. No, we can have a defense company that focuses on building weapons, but they have a great recycle chain where they recycle all the materials. They can also be offsetting all their emissions. They can have great governance structures in their board. They can have great benefits for employees, such as great paternity leave. No, so this would give us in an ESG screening a very high score. No, this could be a top performing company in terms of ESG. No, but at the same time, we're talking about weapons. No, that intrinsically embeds a moral position. No, around this. Are we in favor? Are we against it? And so on. Same with labor models. No, we're now seeing with the rise of AI, big platforms such as Uber, Lyft, and also some big companies such as Google and Meta, generating a lot of employment. No, but what kind of employment is it? No, what are the conditions for the employees? No, in some cases we're almost in the line of slavery. No, so I think it's important to discuss these questions, and this is something that ESG is not going to be solving. No, so maybe we can go to the next slide, Lorenzo. Thank you. So maybe we can go into these topics a bit more deep, so that we can discuss. No, so we see. No, for example, I think we're all seeing, and I think this was also briefly discussed in some of the sessions we had before on the tensions. No, and we see a big VC interest surging post-Ukraine, and now with the current global situation more and more. No, but we're seeing great founders building in this space. So I wanted also to ask into the room, no, Do you think that the topic of defense is inherently negative, or is it necessary to keep peace in this global context? How do you see this from an ESG perspective? Do you think that ESG can actually account for this? Not? Does anyone want to share some initial thoughts?
I'll break the ice and go first. So, aside from what we do, right, that is boxed by our exclusion list and so on and so forth, I think that what you said at the beginning is the key point of this session. Meaning, there are investment decisions that brings moral decisions with themselves, right? So, regardless of let's say the ESG score of a given company, at the end of the day, you really need to look at what the company is trying to achieve as their mission to understand whether it's something you're comfortable with, aside from being something that it's in line with your bylaws. At the end of the day, I think that in terms of, let's say, the question about around weaponry in general, of course, we would love all a world with no weapons at all. But then, of course, history does repeat itself. And again, aside from what we do here at Rancilio Cube, I'm wondering whether a world with better weapons, in terms of even defining what better means, is kind of a strange concept in a way, right? Um, but I think it's impossible to answer this question. This is my kind of thought. So, uh, of course, it's negative to have more weapons or better weapons or more lethal weapons and so on and so forth. But if we want to be practical, the modern world in which we live, is built around military capacity and deterrences, right? So, yeah, this is my take. Sorry for taking so long to express it.
I continue. You're opening Belen the Pandora space, I guess.
Yeah.
It's controversial, and for example, I mean, a couple of months ago, I analyzed a company that was doing the dome, so the protection of the UK environment. The purpose of the company is creating weapons. In reality, not. Is to defend UK if someone get crazy and launch a missile against UK. I mean, probably preventing life from casualties, from issues, from death. Can you consider it weapons or not? In my view, no. So I mean, it's really crucial and controversial.
Yeah, I agree. If I may, I agree with Massimo. It's quite difficult to define what's really in terms, especially in terms of infrastructure, what's really can be defined as a mean to build a weapon. Because, for instance, an internet infrastructure, could it be considered as a mean to deploy I don't know, a cyber weapon, or is it a drone, a weapon, even if it's used, for instance, for
Medical purposes.
yeah, to bring medicines in a remote place. So there is this dual use theme, which is really difficult to define in in strict terms. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Um, it's a difficult topic to define.
And consider internet. We would not have invested in the beginning of internet if we would not invest if he had not invested in defense. Because I mean, internet is a military
Yeah,
creation.
yeah.
No,
Totally.
my boss say no. My boss say no, so I agree with him.
Can I tell something, Belen?
Of course.
No, that's not true. Internet was created at CERN,
Yeah,
no?
but the DARPA was American.
In the CERN. So, how you say Belen paraculo in Spanish? You have paraculo. No, you don't have
No,
it.
the
Something
DARPA,
something
the
similar, but
DARPA.
because the three guys here, Lorenzo, Massimo, Martino, they try to be paraculo and to say that everything is allowed because no one is allowed. Everything is allowed. No, we have to if it's not something clear, we have to clarify. And as we have a very clear thesis, even was for me ridiculous when we put it at the beginning of our company, like human clonation,
Yes.
pornography, and defense and weapons was for me like stupid. We have to put weapons. Now it's becoming an issue, as you say. No, so let's try ourselves to clarify what is something to let's say attack and create a worse society. I can only say something like this, in which there is not anymore the human being at the in the middle of the table, no. And what is controversial, we can discuss it and avoid and ask, because we are doing investment in funds, to follow up with our restriction. No, so I know Massimo is right. It's not maybe easier, would be difficult, but we have to try to do an effort, at least our best effort, to put outside of the table everything can be controversial or without our moral, even because our platform, to be concrete, is made of families investing in, no. So okay, money for money is interesting for everyone, but at the end we have to follow something that is a long-term distance approach and is in line with the families are backing us.
And I agree, Belen, but I mean, here I need your help. Take a drone. I mean, a few years ago, the dawn of the drone were the delivery stuff. I mean, we had funds that invest in drone to deliver a human being from the airport directly to the middle of the town. Okay, despite the environmental issues and whatever, it's a drone. Can a drone consider a dual usage product, and so we should be banned from our investment thesis?
If it's a big like a car, it's difficult that it takes picture or not.
Hey, but people.
Yeah, okay, but if it's the kind of drone used for, no, we can try to skip it. And we can try also to skip that kind of funds, because we are talking about this, in which they follow Ursula indication, no? Defense. Because now start to be a little bit clear in this environment. Is more difficult, to my opinion, in the United States. We saw years ago with this American dynamism, something like with American dynamism, everything is possible. No, we have to try to skip what is everything is possible. We can focus other sector, we can focus biotech, we can focus something that is always in line with the idea to invest where the human being is respected. That's my opinion.
And I think this is great because this is exactly the topic of today, opening the Pandora box. And I think, Luca, you made a really good point. And this is not something that any framework can solve. So, Massimo, also to your point on your question to the drone, I don't know. I have no idea. I think this is totally up to you, to your strategy, to your exclusion list, no? And I think everything is contextual and implies a moral decision, no? That every company has their own, no? And many of them are contradictory. I think that's a bit the key, no? And exactly the type of discussions that we should have, no? And I think you made a really good point for Nexus for the next slide, Lorenzo, and we can get back to the other examples in a bit, because I think this is exactly the issue with ESG, no? That people seems to look at it as the holy grail. If we're doing ESG, we're the good guys, but it actually entails many issues. ESG, as we were saying, it's a framework that presents themselves as objective. And this is totally false, no? Because in reality, everything is much more messier, but also more interesting, no? It has more meat to the bone, no? So for example, ESG claims to be objective, but every framework reflects the moral position, the political position of the people who design it, no?
Right.
In the session where we looked at the ESG in practice, we saw that there are many different standards. Every standard has its moral implications derived from the humans that created it. Even the key index, no, such as MSCI, Sustainalytics, ISS, they do not agree with each other. In many cases, they contradict each other, and this is not an accident. ESG is not solving it, no, and we need to be very aware of it. That at the end of the day, it's us designing our own framework with our moral implications and how we think about the world and what's good, what's taking into account the different trade-offs. Also, ESG claims to be measurable, right? And this is also what we were trying to do with our ESG tool, to account for everything, to have a scoring so that it can be comparable, and so on, no? But at the end of the day, it's hard to measure, to quantify environmental issues, social issues, governance issues in different contexts, right? We're comparing apples to pears day to day. So we're making an oversimplification of the reality, which is fine, no? Because at the end of the day, we need to make decisions and we need some guidelines to help us make those decisions. But it's not as measurable and as data-driven as it's normally perceived of, no? And I think as we were delving, no, into the exercise of building the ESG tool, the ESG framework, we had these discussions, no, with Massimo, with Lorenzo, no? And same about comparability. We were just discussing it. It's difficult, and in some cases a bit wrong, to standardize the different ratings across sectors, across geographies. It's a difficult one, no? And very linked to all of this, ESG claims to be universal. It claims to be a framework that is applicable to everyone, everywhere, in every sector. But at the end of the day, it's a moral mirror, no? It forces us as investors to look at these uncomfortable questions, no? So at the end of the day, ESG is actually very contextual, value-driven, full of trade-offs, and also uncomfortable, no? As a framework, because it can be easier, no? Maybe to say, okay, we have a scoring, and for example, going back to the initial example of a defense tech company that has great parental leave, offsetting emissions, and recycling everything, and not ask the hard questions, no? That is exactly what you, Massimo, Lorenzo, Luca, Martino, were bringing to the table, no? That it's the grace, it's the shades of grace, no? At the end of the day, and as Luca was also saying, it's hard, but one makes a decision, no? It can be responding to the different shareholders, to the LPs, whatever, no? But yeah, that's a bit the issue, no? And what I was trying to reflect here. I don't know if you have any comments or thoughts on this.
Yes, that the most complicated, you remember that we created the risk framework from ESG. The most complicated to be filled in, that was supposed to be the easiest one, so restriction, is actually the most complicated one.
Totally.
Yeah, but one, no? Because all the other restriction we are.
Yes.
We can focus on defense without be vegan, because it's difficult to be vegan, but try to put our restriction and to say, okay, this is for us the limit. If people does drone big like a car, for me is a limit, no? We can ask. We also have the fortune to be a third parties, no, in asking the funds what they are doing. If they in their case is clear, we can skip it, no? But on the other side, we can maybe create our own frame. I don't know if it's possible to say, okay, for us this is the limit, no? Because in the portfolio one, when you talk about slavery, I remember that in the portfolio one there was Deliveroo, and again was controversial even that time, no? So we know that we have it, and for someone yes, for someone is an opportunity, for someone not. Maybe I would not do it again, no? If I go back and I have the kind of we exit Deliveroo, so it's something solved, no? But if you ask me, would you repeat the Deliveroo today? Maybe not, no? it's something I can stay without. So we have also the fortune to do a job in which we can create a little bit our own framework.
Yeah, and I mean, just to conclude on that, in the past, we really refused and didn't accept a couple of investment with exclusion. One was related to the facial recognition, and the other one was related to alcohol distribution, something like that. I mean, we don't see so many cases that are borderline, except defense.
Innovation is tricky from one side, but from the other side is not sitting on, let's say, the maquillage, no, the washing of something, no, is in the case of defense is really surprising, even to us. But the world is changing in this direction. We can put more attention on it. That's my opinion.
Yeah. And maybe, Lorenzo, we can move the slide, but also, Luca, thinking about the example that you just mentioned, no, on Deliveroo, that was you already exited this investment, but what changed, no, in these years? Was it because you think the information you had about the company was increased, or because actually the perception around this type of work? Because it's also, I mean, it's also something that changes very rapidly, no? What we think it's a good investment now, can it be something very controversial in 5 years? No, also
Well,
regulation.
we had many investments in transportation in general. For example, scooters, they don't kill anyone, no, they don't slave anyone, but change transportation is quite difficult, no. So if you put beside the idea that if it's not, let's say, something with big margin, is difficult itself. That's why also create a slavery, no? So I try to be as more real as I can. I'm not telling you just because it's not an impact investment, no. Both. It's very difficult to do something stable and with margin, and on the other side is that's why also is leveraging humanity in such a rude way. Can you do something else, Luca and the group? Of course we can do it. So we can do something different, no? We didn't have the mentality at the time also to elaborate on scoring ESG and an activity like we can do it today.
Totally, no, it's something that changes rapidly, no?
Yeah, I think it's also appreciable, no, that we are not vegan. We start from a point of view, let's say, with our difficulties, but we try to do something in a more clear direction.
Totally, and there's also some sort of trend, no, in these ESG topics, no. One day, all the funds and the trend is to be ESG labeled, and the next day, as we're discussing also in the context of the US, they stop doing ESG, and ESG is not trendy and nice anymore, no. So that is also to say, no, what you were saying about the mentality, no, and how value-driven and contextual it is, no. And maybe just quickly to highlight a bit more, what are the issues with the ESG frameworks, no? Is that it can be very easily that we say, okay, we have our ESG framework, so we have a scoring, and the scoring replaces judgment in this type of conversations, no? And that the fact of reporting on ESG, for example, to the Italian authorities, that takes a bit out or replaces the accountability of having these discussions, as well as compliance, no? As soon as a company is compliant with the law, no, as the case that you were saying, Luca, the Deliveroo at the time, no, that I'm sure it was compliant, we don't ask the moral question, no? Are there better alternatives in the market to invest, or do we care about this topic? Yes, no? Yeah, just to highlight a bit, but maybe we can move to the next slides. The next slides were designed to discuss these topics, no? And I think, for example, the case of defense and weapons, we have discussed already quite a lot. I don't know if we want to change to another topic, or we want to discuss a bit. Let's change to another topic. Yeah. So yeah, it's also a very hot topic today, no? On climate and energy transition. I think there's a structural contradiction, no, in climate tech, climate VC. Climate VCs say that they fund clean energy while holding high emission portfolio companies, while also taking into account that climate tech requires energy intensive infrastructure. There's also another contradiction or dilemma, is that refusing to fund fossil fuels companies might also slow down the transition, no? Or it can also be, no, that one cannot live with the other and are complementary, no, more than enemies. But the tension, so to say, is that full decarbonization is the goal, but it's maybe a very optimistic goal and requires time and requires pragmatism, no? Refusing to fund fossil fuels, it's almost impossible, no? Because they're embedded in the whole value chain, no? Many climate tech companies that claim to be clean because they're funded by clean energy are not looking maybe at their chains of providers. Also, the use of AI, it's very heavy, as we know, no, in consumption of energy for the warehouse and how do they call the farms, no? Also, clean tech VC remains to be very dependent on having high fossil fuel prices so that it's competitive or attractive enough. So there are many tensions there, no? And we're living there with a hypocrisy. So what do you think? Do you think it's hypocritical? Can you be a credible climate investor while taking a lot of flights? I think this is actually not the best example, no? But I think the question is not whether transition needs capital. The question is, where does a climate investor or someone that claims to be a climate investor allocate its capital, no? And I mean, maybe it's a bit more gray than in the case of weapons from a moral perspective, but there's also a huge shades of gray, no? And a lot of positions. I don't know if this is something that you've encountered a lot or something that you've discussed in the different ICs.
Let's say, since we're not a pure climate dedicated fund or funds, we don't have these kind of discussions so often. But of course, I mean, our world is built on fossil fuels, right? So what I think that as an industry, as VC, we should be doing, and we're trying to do in our world, is to try to actually finance the moonshots that will get to a state where we'll need less and less fossil fuels, right? For instance, the Proxima Fusion one that we often mention, or other companies that we have in the United States. What I think it's let's say it's practical for everyone to remember is that, I mean, you can't go from this state to a full decarbonized world without going through innovations also on fossil fuels themselves, right? On the efficiency in which you use those fuels. But again, it all boils down to being practical and understanding where your thinking lies in terms of your objectives, right?
Totally. Totally, and I think you're right. No, maybe if we move to the next slide, it's going to be a bit more relatable to the type of investments that you guys are looking at, no, and doing. And I think it was one of the examples that you actually brought to the table earlier, Massimo, no, on facial recognition, no, that it was an investment opportunity that you decided to pass on. So I think this is very hot today, no? And we have some issues or tensions such as surveillance tech, data scraping, data privacy, algorithmic bias, cybersecurity, and so on, that I don't think we can treat them separately, but in many cases, they're interlinked, no? And they live together. So I don't think we need to go through each of them, no, because I think we all know what are the main issues, no, with surveillance text, with facial recognition, location training, behavioral profiling, or data privacy, algorithmic bias, no, models that for example, take out minorities by default, no, by construction, and also the issues with cybersecurity, no. But the question is, what do we think about these issues? I think you partially responded with the examples earlier before. How are you currently positioning about this? And also, how do we want to theoretically, or thinking about this? Do we want to invest first and then analyze? To have a clear statement around these topics? Is it too early? Yeah, over to you. I don't know if anyone wants to share some thoughts or ideas on this.
My general thinking around privacy and everything that is privacy related is that, I mean, as people, as individuals, all of us, we have very little understanding on how our data is used and consumed by companies, right? So let's say as long as we as a company and the partners we invest in, they respect what is the current legislation around privacy and data protection, I mean, everything is fine on our side. Then how this data is used to make new innovations, think about AI. AI is built on training on a huge amount of data sets. That is basically our interactions with the web, with the internet, right? So there is a positive spillover of using someone data anonymized to foster a new innovation.
Yeah. And there's also a disadvantage, no, geographically speaking, no, on data privacy and how much a company can grow depending on whether they're in Europe, for example, or the States or Asia, no, as well.
But then even legislation is as subjective as ESG frameworks, right? Because
Okay.
take the privacy example that you made now. So in Europe, we have a point of view which is very, let's say, protective of individuals. In the US, they have a completely different one. So they, in terms of current legislation around data protection, I mean, we are basically talking about two different languages here, right? And thus it brings different kind of opportunities in both contexts. But let's say even in Europe, there are companies that are focused on data protection, on the privacy of the single user, the single individual. They're making, I mean, great progress because they operate in such an environment. Think about all the VPNs companies that we have in Europe, or the let's say other data protection tools that you can use on the web. Again, it's super
Okay.
subjective.
Indeed. No, super good point. Thank you, Lorenzo. And maybe if we go to the next slide, we can discuss some practical key takeaways, no? I think as law, as legislation, as many different examples, ESG entails many issues, no? And it's subjective, it's value-driven, it's contextual, as we were saying, but there's also an interesting shift from using ESG for reporting, no, and for compliance only, but to action, no. So what are some things that we can do, or practical tips, no, some ideas? One point that we have discussed quite a lot is to make moral positions explicit, no, what we will not invest on. For example, this is something that you guys already have in your exclusion list, but it's also fine to say that it's not written in stone, no? It can be that in 5 years, something happens in the market and new exclusions come, or some sectors go out of the exclusion list, no? So it's important also to revisit it from time to time, as these things do not necessarily have to be written in stone, no? It's okay to revisit them, to discuss them, and to make them explicit. Another topic is to acknowledge openly the different trade-offs, no? With every investment, there are winners and losers. I mean, this is a no-brainer, no? So it's also important when looking, no, at the ESG scoring, or when choosing one company over the other, what are the trade-offs, no, on investing on a certain company versus another, even if it's the best company doing, I don't know, goods, let's say bringing internet to areas that do not have internet, it can entail very different issues, and trade-offs. And again, focus on decision moments. We're saying, so we're discussing earlier. At the time, Luca, you were putting the example. You made an investment that maybe you would not repeat now with the information and with the person you are today. And maybe Massimo, the facial recognition company that you decided not to invest a while ago, maybe you would do now. So it's important also to acknowledge these things and also to ask the good questions. Who benefits from this investment? What is the possible harm? Are we comfortable with this risk, with all these trade-offs? I think these are some practical ideas or guides for us as investors, to navigate this ESG, and again, so we're saying ESG has many issues and it's messy. It's not perfect. So it's important to navigate it. Good. I'm looking at time, so I don't want to keep you for too long. So maybe we can move to the next slide. Yeah. So I think, the discussion and also for closing, and I would like also to open the floor for you for the next minutes, is I think the question is not whether we do ESG. I think ESG, it's just a framework that again we can define and we can build based on our principles, on our values, on our exclusion list already. It's what are the consequences and what are the moral trade-offs in how and what we invest on. So I think we already discussed most of the questions in this slide here. And I think also the key message of this session is that there are no clean or right answers. There are only honest ones. And I think at the end of the day, one needs to make a position in today's world on what we want to invest and what we don't want to invest on. And may I open the floor? I don't know if anyone wants to share something about this session, something that you feel was left out, or some additional comments or questions before we jump into the closing.
Well, I suggest to, especially in defense, and especially for the future, one volunteer in particular, Massimo, has to decline a little bit better, take the exclusion, and based on his knowledge, it is start to be very, very big now, try to put a limit, a perimeter in which he says, okay, this for me, it's the limit. Based on his sensibility, he is from the same city where I'm from. He has 2 children. He can say where there is the human being at the center or not. And who is controversial, we can discuss it. But I suggest him to take in particular defense. You raised the point also of security or cyber security, surveillance, and while we were talking, I want to add that the case that we had was in China, so we have to connect it a little bit. I have nothing against China, but because of course I can kill a person even with a table, if I want. But on the other side, if we are in a place in which an investment is not related to respect the human rights, okay, can be an issue. If it's a place, I know it's a light definition, it's not very vegan, it's not very strong. But on the other side, if we are in a place like Europe, in which security is security for people, okay, for me it can be again. But I will start with defense. If we can try to put something that is a second step of our restrictions, And I want to ask also, I don't know, Stefania, Marco, that are our best performer as a consultant advisor. They are always here, so I want to thank also them. If they have something to, if they agree with me or they want to add something. Stefania si sta... Okay.
Io sono assolutamente d'accordo, mi sembra un buon punto di partenza, anzi, diciamo pregevole, ecco, considerando anche appunto il tipo di attività che fate, qualcosa forse di anche oltre rispetto. Sorry, sorry for the Italian. I was speaking in Italian. I just wanted to
Va bene anche in italiano.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that it seems to me that the suggestion from Luca is a very good starting point, especially for the kind of activity that they perform. I mean, this is not strictly necessary, I would like to say, but absolutely appreciate the effort and the idea to start from this. So I absolutely agree with Luca.
Great.
I agree, surely.
Grazie.
Thank you very much. Grazie.
Grazie mille, Belen.
Thank you everyone for your
Grazie.
engagement. For the nice
Thank you.
Bye.
Ciao.
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 Va bene, ciao.
Ciao.